My name is Krista Guzman, and I'm an Environment and Development Planner. I'm here with the North Central Texas Council of Governments. And my colleague Elena Berg and I are going to be co-moderating today's webinar. I work with several of our stormwater programs here, including the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Task Force. And Elena works with the Water Resources Council. And today's webinar is part of the Stormwater and Water Quality Management programs. For those who may be a little bit unfamiliar with who we are, I'll take a brief moment to give you an overview. The North Central Texas Council of Governments, or sometimes referred to as the COG, is a voluntary association of local governments. We are one of 24 COGs in the state of Texas, and our main function is to transcend jurisdictional boundaries to help promote sound development and facilitate cooperation among our member governments. And a fruition of that, if you will, is today's webinar, where we have several speakers who are going to help share with the rest of our region some of the best management practices that they've implemented. So we do have a full agenda today with some great information from 5 different speakers. So our first speaker today is Perry Harts. Perry works with the city of Frisco as a division manager. And so Perry, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. For those of you who are new to stormwater, you might not be aware, but the MS4 permit is built around the best management practices, the most effective BMPs, to implement those to the maximum extent practicable. So how do you know what the most effective BMPs are? Well, it's events like this, where the cities can collaborate together and sort through these things. And over the years, the Council of Government has provided many of these type of events and made the collaboration possible for the cities. And I want to thank COG for putting this on and all the events they've provided in the past. I want to talk about 4 BMPs that we have in Frisco. That we have a lot of BMPs, obviously, but I just picked 4 of them that I think we're doing something that's a little bit different, maybe a little nuanced to what others are doing. And the idea is that you might benefit from the way we're doing it and make it your best management practice as well. But I serve on a team we do a lot of things I think really well, and I don't mention everyone's, and I don't mean to leave anyone out by not mentioning the BMPs that they're involved in, but I picked these 4 for the reason I stated, that others might benefit from it as well. The 4 are involving street cleaning, adopt a street, the way we handle single family housing, and then our trash rack. Now, first talk about our street sweeping, and let me shed a little bit of light on our street sweeping program. First of all, if you're not familiar with the street sweeping, this particular type of street sweeper is a regenerative air sweeper. And does my cursor show up on the screen? Anyway, yeah. It does show?
Yeah.
Okay. The regenerative type sweeping, which picks up fines and other things, is a very effective way of sweeping. I'm going to mention that and how we use that in a moment. We have 3 types of sweeping in Frisco. We have the contract sweeping, which is done with the regenerative air, and then we have an in-house sweeping program that has 1 regenerative sweeper and then a broom, which I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. On our contract sweeping, I found that it's effective for if you give them routes and they do them over and over again. And we have 2 times a month for our thoroughfares, once a month for collectors. They're very effective at doing that. And then also sand removal after a winter like what we just had. They're good at that, but they don't do so well in jumping around. And that's what we got our house sweeping program for. And we do that for our city yards. From time to time, our yards get in a mess like every week because of the activities that we do, the digging in mud and so forth. So the yards need to be swept, and we also do residential streets as needed with in-house sweeping and sand removal. We help on that as well. So we found that jumping around is good with the in-house sweeper. But we also needed a broom, and this is a broom I'm talking about. And this is more for emergency cleanups, and the stormwater actually purchased this broom here for as a pool broom for the street department, water department, stormwater, anyone who makes a mess, they can go out and clean up their mess. And this is relatively new. And one reason we got it is the regenerative sweeping takes a couple of days of training to learn how to do this. This one you can learn how to operate in 30 minutes. It has an air-conditioned cab, and I resisted getting an air-conditioned cab, but then we realized, okay, what's the best chance of getting the street swept on a hot day? An air-conditioned cab, and also it protects the operator too from all the dust generated. And so this gives the crews a way to clean up after themselves, and like I said, it was paid for by the stormwater. Another key thing with this is the waste management have a central location for dumping. So when our contract sweeper comes here, we have a central place in town for them to dump. And we have it all dumped in one pile, whether it's from us or our stormwater crews. And we haul that waste to the landfill where it's weighed. And to give you an example how much we hauled away after the snow event, we hauled away 254 tons. In 2020, we reported 523 tons picked up for the whole year. So we picked up almost half of our annual weight in just a few weeks after the storm event. And then in 2019, we picked up 804 tons. Now, I bring this up because this is part of my annual report, and we put on there that we removed 804 tons. And yes, the pollutants are physically removed. The street's part of the MS4. You pick it up off the street, it's physically removed from the MS4. So lessons learned, important thing is have a central place for dumping. And I recommend an RFP for your street sweeping. Don't go out with a straight contract bid to get the low bidder. You want an RFP. And if your purchasing department needs help on that, ours is really good at doing that. And we can help out on that. And the key thing is record the weight for your annual report. And then have a broom for quick cleanup. And then there's an example of a regenerative air sweeper, and it also cleans out inlets. Okay, the next program I'm going to talk about real quick is our Adopt a Street. And a lot of people have Adopt a Street programs. Now, I didn't pick on them, not just because they take the best photos, they do, but there's an important thing on it. Trash is, I would say, and I think there's a lot to back this up, is our largest pollutant by volume. And when you pick it up along the edge of the street, it's part of the, I consider it part of the MS4. If it's not in the street yet, it will be soon. The stormwater will blow it in, or the wind will blow it in, or stormwater take it in. And it's a force multiplier. So this group of people here will know the importance of keeping the trash off the street, and they'll tell their friends, and it's a way to get the word out. And this is something else I put on the annual report, and we got help from our people that do the Adopt a Street, that they got a way to calculate the cubic yards that are collected. And so this is from our annual report. We collected 413 yards of waste that was physically removed from the MS4, from the Adopt a Street program. So there's a couple of things that I think they're done well here. Is the use of CityWorks to create a spatial database where it's done with the GIS, and they do spatial measurements and so forth. We got a fantastic program, and this lady here, Juliana Marie, runs a really great program, and you can contact her for more information. But this group of people, like I said, they take great pictures. There's no bounds and limits on what can take with this program, so it's infinity and beyond with this group. Okay, the next thing I'm going to talk about is our building program. We might know a little bit about this since we have 1,979 active building permits right now. And so we have a little bit of experience in this area. And I'm distinguishing building construction from civil construction. The civil construction is the infrastructure such as mass grading, roads and bridges, water and so forth. And the structures, which is a different type of construction. If you look at these two pictures here, you can visualize what you would expect to be the maximum pollutant discharging from the site. Obviously, from the civil side, it's erosion sediment that's a problem. In building construction, it's going to be trash and debris is going to be a big one. Another key difference between these two programs, we have 131 civil sites, and like I said, we've got 1,989 permits right now for building. And we have an approach I think is scalable for all types of cities, regardless of size on this. And we were so overwhelmed with this that we had to adopt something. I think that others can benefit from this. And it's the same permit, but we treat them different. the builders are many times mom and pop operations, and so they don't know, and they really are ignorant sometimes of some of these requirements. And so we inform them, get them up to speed, do a lot of education, and a lot of the work's done by subs. So the builder on this site doesn't have as much control over his site as maybe a civil site does. And you got high turnover. It's a lot of problems. Trash is a big problem. Concrete waste and track out and trash is a big problem from these sites. So with this, it's like herding cats. So what do? We don't go inspect them. It's impossible for us to inspect 1,989 projects efficiently to make sure they're up to speed. But what we do is audit them and make sure that they're inspecting them, make sure they're doing their weeklies, and we go through their process to make sure their process is actually going on. And so we don't spend a lot of time inspecting them. We spend a lot of time auditing to make sure that they're inspecting them. And so we don't actually even do a lot of citations. There's one thing that we do a lot do citations on is concrete waste. That's one, probably our only no exception, no tolerance rule. But other than that, we are trying to help them get up to speed and make sure they're doing their processes. But we will issue a citation for something like this on that. So in summary, for the single family, it's different than the civil, and we treat it different. And like I say, zero tolerance on the concrete spills, and we're just trying to tame the West, and the auditing process helps a lot. Chris Collis has got a great program on doing this, and there's his email, and he can share the audit program and what they do on the single family. Last thing I want to talk about is our trash rack, and I only got a minute to talk about this, but our permit requires a way to collect trash, floatables, and this is something we built. And we built this in November, put it in. And the reason we did that is MS4 permit phase 2 or phase 4 requires some device to collect it. We sketched this out on the board, and I had a really fantastic welder and fabricator was able to take this and build it. The key takeaway from this is a breakaway approach. It breaks in the middle. It's a shear pin in the middle, much like what's on the signpost. Is the shear pin, the signpost will snap when it's hit and will break open. And the idea is it won't flood. And here's my geniuses at work, and they got this built, and this is what it looks like in place. So we also had the freeze tested. That's a part of our rigorous testing program, is subjected to 0-degree temperatures, and it passed that with flying colors. But this is what my team took. They took this and they converted it into this. The Council of Governments was gracious enough to have someone come out and measure and get this drawings on this so it could be used by others. So it was installed in November of 2020. So in my annual report, we collected 342 pounds at that time, and that goes on my annual report. Since then, we've collected a ton, and I suppose key feature of this is a ball bearing hinge so that it can support the weight of this. Anyway, there's going to be a lot more information on this at the event that's coming up on May 26th, and I'm sure Chris will have more to say on this. But this wraps up all I got to say, and I'm ready to turn it back over to Elena, and I will be watching the chat. So if you got questions, you can put your questions in the chat, and I'll turn it over to Kristen.
Thank you, Perry. Thank you for leading our conversation today. We appreciate you, and we'll take control back of the slides. And I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Echo Rexroad. She is the Environmental Quality Manager for the City of Plano, and she also currently serves as the Vice Chair of COG's Regional Stormwater Management Coordinating Council. So Echo, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hi there, thank you, Perry. That was very impressive. I hope you're patenting that. So yes, I think you have control, so go ahead and next slide. So today I'll be discussing with you about our dry weather screening program, our illicit discharge detection and elimination program. I know that about all of our phase 1s are required to do this program, and the level 4 phase 2s are required. But I think it's a really good thing to showcase for anyone else who does not currently implement this program, because it's a really great BMP. I'm also going to discuss our auto-related businesses inspection program, our HHW collection, and floatables removal. Just to start, so I chose this one because it is my absolute favorite BMP that we implement. And the reason being is because it's the boots on the ground. You really see the results of your efforts. You find so many different types of illicit discharges that you would not have found otherwise. For those of you not completely familiar with the dry weather screening program, it's basically you go out and you inspect all of your outfalls that are feeding into your waterways. And if you see flow, then you trace that flow back to the source. You make whoever the source is stop, and then you remediate whatever is in the water. So it's a really great program. One of my favorite examples of this is the one in the pictures seen on the top left, or on the side on the left. And that was taken in Plano. We found this and traced it back to a gas station. Turns out it was an underground storage tank that was leaking petroleum, and we were not able to see it until a break in a line in our stormwater line was created, and then it got into the storm drain. And so we found this, we turned it over to the TCEQ. We fixed the storm drain line, so it's no longer being discharged, but now the TCEQ is currently under the process of overseeing the enforcement to remediate that site. You'll have all kinds of illicit discharges that you'll find. Construction sedimentation, like the picture in the second from the left, and sanitary sewer overflows. We see a lot of building materials and pool plaster. A lot of pool plaster companies are always washing their plaster down the storm drain inlet. And the good thing about that is you'll be able to catch them, and while they're transient, they move from site to site, but you can at least give them a notice of violation and let them know that, hey, if you do this again in our city, then you're going to get a citation, or you just start off giving them a citation, just depending on how egregious it is. So in the city of Plano, we have 3,000 major outfalls that we inspect each year. We are required, or not each year, every permit term. So we inspect 20% of these every year. And so we have 4 specialists that inspect those. So that's 150 outfalls that they're inspecting each year. This is in addition to the other programs that they oversee. So it's something they just have to fit into their schedule. It's done during, of course, dry weather time. And that is for a couple of reasons. One, you don't want to go out and sample for something when all the pollutants has already been washed away. But you don't want to sample when it's just rain, because you're going to have flow in almost all of your outfalls, and you'll just waste a lot of time. So we were having some issues in Plano with our high water table. So we were getting a lot of groundwater coming out of our outfalls. We found that if you test for trihalomethanes, that actually shows that if it was whatever you're sampling was once chlorinated or was once disinfected. So, anything from sanitary sewer overflows to a drinking water line, you'll be able to tell if that groundwater is actually not groundwater. And so the first couple of years, we wasted a lot of time testing groundwater. But now that we know where those groundwater sites are, we no longer sample at those locations when we see just regular water coming out. We use a Palin test kit. Those cost about $840. Those mainly, we use that for our nutrients and iron, copper, nitrate, and phosphate. We use our own meters for ammonia, pH, dissolved oxygen, chlorine, and conductivity. But if you don't want to spend the money on all of those meters, the Palin test kit was made for the storm drain for the dry weather inspections. So again, many of us are already required to do this, but if you're not, you don't have to go out and all of a sudden start inspecting, all 3,000 of your outfalls. But if you have problem areas, maybe industrial areas, just find out where those outfalls, or where those areas are feeding the outfalls, and maybe just inspect those once a year or once every couple of years. So our auto-related business inspection program, I love this program too, because we have about 3,000 facilities in Plano that are considered auto-related businesses. We inspect every single one of those a year. These are businesses that do anything from mechanical work to auto body repair. On site, we inspect for chemical spills, proper storage and disposal of chemicals, tires and equipment. We also look for standing water issues, of course, being vector or mosquito issues. And we also inspect their grit traps. And we inspect those. We try to get to those once every couple of years to actually inspect the fog in it. But we also make sure that if they do have a floor drain, that they do have a grit trap. We do not have an ordinance for auto-related businesses, and so instead of having an ordinance, we use our stormwater ordinance and our liquid waste generator, our liquid waste management ordinance, to help us with enforcement at these facilities. This is really working for us so far, but if you're looking for a stellar ordinance for auto-related businesses, you can look to the City of Grand Prairie. They have an awesome ordinance. Their whole team has been doing this for quite some time, and as I understand it, the City of Arlington has modeled their ordinance after that one as well. Okay, jumping to HHW. So we do it a little differently in Plano. We don't have the citizens drop it off with us. Instead, we go to them. They are given a chance or an opportunity to put their waste on the curb once a week. So we do it by zip code. 24 hours prior to an event at their house. They just give us a call, or they can submit a request online to have us come by and pick up their HHW. Again, we don't have any drop-off service available, but we do allow them to put at least 15 gallons of HHW on the curb, and we do not collect commercial waste. Okay, this is what our facility looks like when we bring back the HHW. We put it in all of these drums and we label it so that our the people with whom we have a contract, Clean Earth, formerly Stericycle, can come and collect that for us. We have a $94,000 contract with them. It's worked out really well for us for quite a while now. And then items that we deem reusable, we actually, and they're properly labeled, we actually put into our reuse center. So this is our reuse center, and anything that we find, like I said, is still usable, we go ahead and place here. Our citizens can come and take anything they want for free. We're open Wednesdays and Saturdays, and of course, we don't allow anyone to drop off chemicals here. We have people always wanting to come by and drop off their chemicals. But we just go ahead and give them the number to call so that we can go to their house and pick up the chemicals ourselves. Now we're jumping into floatables removal. We have a number of locations throughout Plano where we're collecting floatables. We've taken a lot of sites that were already had a riser or had a spillway. Thank you, Krista. And went ahead and installed devices at those locations. So this is an example of a trash rack that we installed next to or on a riser. The cost to install this was $1,000. The cost to maintain it is $480 a year. We just hop in a John boat and just tool around the riser about 6 times a year, and we've collected about 20 cubic yards of debris and floatables a year on average. So this is the only floating trash boom that we have in Plano. And we installed this in 2017. There was a bit of a sticker shock. The cost to install it was $18,000. The cost to maintain that I have here, I should have really broken that down differently. This is actually for a company to come out about 4 times a month and test for water quality issues. We had some algae and some invasive species issues at this location. So they actually come out and do a number of things for us. But in addition to that, they collect the floatables at this location along the boom. They collect about 10 times a year. And for the price and for what we've done so far, I hate to report that we've only collected about 2.25 55-gallon bags on average a year. But it's located within one of the parks that we felt that we saw a lot of trash getting into that particular waterway. As you can see in the picture on the bottom right, that's the park, and the yellow line is where that boom is located. So the sticker shock of $18,000 was mainly because in my mind, I was thinking that when you put a boom like that, you just tie it to both sides of the stream and call it. But there's actually a lot more that goes into it. So if you're considering something like this, here's what you would be considering. Each side of that boom, you have a concrete footing that goes into the ground. And then you also have to install a maintenance shelf at the bottom and a safety shelf on each side. The safety shelf, of course, is because if someone falls in, you want to make sure they can get out. Okay, trash rack at this spillway. This is a good example of something that was already existing, and then but then we just built something around it. So the spillway was there. In 2018, we installed this trash rack around it for $1,750. So far, we've not had to remove any trash or debris at this location. Okay, and here's another trash rack at a riser example. This one was $6,500 to install. The cost to maintain, again, the John boat is about $240. We remove trash at that location about 3 times a year, but we removed about 3 cubic yards on average per year. Okay, here's another trash rack at a spillway, $1,750 to install, $80 to maintain per year. And we've only had to go out once a year on average, but we collect about 1 cubic yard of trash and debris at that location. And then finally, this I just wanted to include, this is something that's already existing. It's the whole, don't recreate the wheel. We didn't put a trash rack around the spillway, but we still have trash that collects at the entrance there on the top and at the exit on the bottom. I've given a bird's eye view of what that looks like on the right. And because trash is being collected at the top or at the entrance, and then when it overflows, it goes into the exit there. So no trash rack needed. I mean, we know where the trash is. We just go there, make a point to collect it about 12 times a year, and we've collected about 12 cubic yards on average per year. I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Echo. Sounds like maybe the citizens of Plano do a really great job at picking up litter and being involved in addition to collecting everything through your trash racks. So I want to introduce our next speaker, Cody Cash. Cody is the Drainage Programs Specialist with the City of Irving. And Cody, the floor is yours.
Hey, thanks for everybody coming out to view this, besides the minor technical difficulties there. So I'm also going to be talking about trash. Seems to be a major problem in our society and kind of in every city. So ours is a little bit different. I like to give the name of a point source solution to a non-point source problem, because we know it's really, really challenging to stop trash from accumulating everywhere. And it's just going to take time to get, I guess, people educated enough to not throw trash or not dump things in the creek. So at this point, we just do what we can. So here's a quick couple photos of 2 of our trash nets. The one on the left is the first one that we installed, and the one on the right is the second one that we installed. So I wanted to kind of have a strategy for making this happen. Just made this nice little make a plan, find a location, make a cost projection, go through the installation and maintenance, and then importantly, especially for our permit, tracking all the data. So here's a disclosure. These 2 photos are not taken in Irving. It's not that bad. Unless you look really hard, then you might find a couple bad spots. So for the W's, myself and the drainage crew are the primary responsible entities for this. What is it? I keep calling it a trash net, but our nomenclature is a debris collector. When we were wanting to get it in there as quickly as possible. Where? That's such a good question. We're going to take a whole couple slides to look at that, because it's probably the most important part of setting up a debris collector. And why? I think everyone kind of knows why. Floatables are, everywhere, and they have water quality impacts. Some cities are even having TMDL requirements for floatables, and not to mention the ecological and wildlife impact. So for the make a plan section, we have a pollution prevention good housekeeping plan, one of our larger municipal facilities. And one of the things we wanted to try to do was, 1, get a pilot project for the debris collector, and 2, just kind of try something new and see if we could, if it was going to be effective or not. So make a plan was writing this document up. It's pretty boring to read, so won't bore you with the details. So this is our find a suitable location. This is for our first debris collector. The top photo there shows kind of our GIS storm drainage map for everything underground. The red circle is the main outfall that we're going to be targeting. The bottom image shows a Google Earth view of looking to the west, and that also shows the outfall that we're targeting. It's the main one, the sole location of all the underground stormwater discharge from this one facility. So this ended up being a really nice spot to where we could really collect good data and say, hey, this stuff is specifically coming from here. So moving on to the cost projection, this is the fun part. Initially, we had looked at getting a proprietary system from a contractor, Stormwater Systems. They're also known as Stormex, I think. They make a really, really good looking product, but their price tag was a bit out of my range to what I could, conceivably get approved. It was like almost 7,000, not including maintenance. And I thought the nets were kind of small too. They only had 5-foot long nets. So seeing that was kind of disheartening. Kind of made me think, oh, we're not going to be able to get this project going. So I decided, well, let me see if I can put something together halfway decent, and maybe we'll get approval to put it in. So made a long list of a lot of things that we needed to make this happen. I think the total ended up being just under $1,100 for everything, but our main expense was our hammer drill to install all the fasteners and stuff in the concrete. So without that, it was only 500-ish. Still pretty reasonable, much more than we were quoted initially. So here's some photos of the install. The next slide will show some maintenance photos, but mainly we're just drilling into the existing outfall, attaching all the fasteners, epoxying them together, and our initial first debris collector, we had it roped up. It looks really shoddy. Fortunately, between the day we installed it and the first time it rained, someone came out and took off our carabiners and relieved us of our rope. So fortunately, they left the net, but it kind of allowed us to make some improvements. So I guess it was kind of a blessing in disguise. We ended up using little cheap master locks and some metal wire, and that has not been stolen yet, so pretty happy about that. Here's a couple photos of, on the top, the debris collector during a rain event. It kind of backs up the flow a little bit once it gets full, but not enough to cause any serious worry for this specific installation, as it was all under a city facility, so flooding wasn't really a risk here. The bottom photos show after the rain event, the full debris collector, all the trash bags that were loaded up, and then what it looks like after it's been cleaned. So here's a full data sheet from what we have. You'll notice there's debris net 1 and 2. We did install a second one, and I'll talk to you guys about that one next. Just wanted to go over a couple things on our first spreadsheet there, which was we had some oily residue present the first few times we cleaned these out. We installed some oil and heavy metal reduction inlet protection around our outfalls or our inlets, and that seemed to solve the problem. We did get about 100 pounds generally once a month. We would check it. So I think the return was pretty good. As you can see, our second net is a little bit more effective at collection, but we'll talk about it on the next slide. So we're going to follow the same plan. Make a plan, find a location, cost projection, install and maintenance, and data and tracking. So for our second debris collector, looks like we're going to do 2 birds with 1 stone here. We're going to make a plan and find a suitable location. So we've had some complaints from the resident that lives down here and owns this property to the south, getting a lot of trash and debris from one specific outfall that drains from one of our local schools, and also a little bit of residential. So we've been down there a few times and seen quite a bit of trash. All this stuff flows into a small pond you can see in the bottom left photo. So every time you drive down there, you can see it's just floatables everywhere, trash, and so we were wanting to do something to kind of help out, and this ended up being a little more of a challenge as we didn't have immediate access like we did at our municipal facility. So we had to do a little bit more work, install a gate, among other things. Fortunately, our resident there was super eager and super helpful, very accommodating for us to try this out. So here's the same spreadsheet of materials that were required. You'll see this one is much cheaper than the first installation due to our netting, which we were able to get as a promotional prototype item. So the total for this one ended up being just under $400. The main expense ended up being the 12-foot fence gate that we had to install for access for cleaning this thing out. For this one, I went another step further and put some man hours on there and just gave a total labor cost as well. So our grand total was $1,200. I think not too bad considering, but we'll see how the data turns out. Also, I probably would have gotten a longer gate if I could go back in time. So this is what the outfall looked like before we got started on it. It's a 48-inch outfall, just like the one at our first location, but this is more of a head wall and a little bit easier to work on than the weird angled outfall. So we would definitely have to remove some vegetation, kind of clean up the area before we could get started with our installation. So the top left photo shows the gate we installed. Like I said, it seems like 12 feet was going to be plenty at the time. I just kind of winged it. And yeah, if I could go back, I definitely would have gone for the 16-foot gate. The bottom left photo shows a really high-level rendition of what we were wanting to achieve for fasteners. And the photo on the right kind of shows the eye bolts installed. And I think the next slide will show a few more installation photos. So the eye bolts are in, the threaded rods are in the bottom, and then on the right we have the finished product. This one specifically is not really as full of a capture system as our initial project, mainly because this one would be a little more challenging if we did have a backup to repair, as this one runs between a couple houses, and I also didn't know how much water was going to be flowing through here, so wanted to just kind of play it safe initially and make it to where we could go back and change it if we were not getting the desired result. So here's the debris collector after a light rain. This one tends to collect mostly leaves, and you'll see we piled up some concrete on the sides due to the low flows kind of bypassing the net, and our homeowner down there gave me some information that a lot of floatables were still getting by during low flows. So we were trying to remedy that in this quick solution. Didn't really work, but actually all got washed away during the next big rain. So that didn't work out, but you know, we always just try to adapt. This one's actually a video. I don't know if it'll play, but this is kind of what the debris collector looks like. Oh yeah. During a rain, you can see that not just during low flows, we have a lot of bypass around the sides. And this collector tends to fill up with a lot of debris more so than trash. So I'm almost even hesitant to move it closer just for the safety aspect. But it does work well. It does capture a lot. Sometimes we have a lot of trash in there. Usually it's just more leaves and debris. But either way, it's keeping it out of that person's pond and probably improving the water quality anyway. So you can see our second debris net tends to capture a bit more. We did have one instance where there was 800 pounds, but our crew did not take any photos for me that day, so that was a bit of a letdown. But generally, it's outperforming our initial net. the net is actually bigger, so I think it's probably all based on location. This one's more lower watershed, and it drains a bigger area that's public, so you're just likely to have more trash, floatables, and debris. So I'd call it pretty successful. Our total's been almost 1,700 pounds. It's probably more than that now. I don't think this is the most updated list. I think we've cleaned it since during this month. So anyway, pretty good comparison. So why do I think that these debris nets are great? One, they're really cheap. Have a dig there at Stormwater Solutions. Sorry if any of you guys are watching, but it was very expensive otherwise. The ease of customization. So these are pretty modular. You can really remove them, move them, and install at a new outfall with relatively low expense, probably under $30 in epoxy and fasteners. This can be scaled, so it's all kind of depending on how big your net is, whatever outfall you want to target. If you do have specific outfalls you want to target, if you just notice, hey, we're getting a lot of floatables in this area, you can trace it back. It's almost kind of like an IDD trace. You can go back and find a source and say, oh, well, looks like most of this area is draining through this one large outfall. You can put a net up and see how it does for a few months. And if it's not performing well, you can just move it for really cheap. Everything's easily to mount. You just drill holes and epoxy everything in, or put a wire rope through and a couple master locks. But they simply work just because, we're able to get data, and also for future permit regulations, like I mentioned earlier, some places are going through TMDLs with floatables. I know in the Northeast they're having that issue. Certain areas, like I know LA also has a full trash capture on all of their stormwater stuff. So yeah, it works, and it's pretty cheap, and you can move it. Why not? Well, you could have some negative impacts if you have fish. We don't really have that many fish in our man-made channels, so I haven't seen any. Animals could get stuck in there, I suppose, but haven't seen that either. Maintenance is the big why not. So it definitely is a thing you have to maintain. We don't have a safety detachment system like Perry does. Perry, that's really cool. I wish we could implement something like that, but haven't gotten there yet. Flooding is an issue. Potentially siltation is an issue. If the water's getting stagnant, pulled up behind the net, you can definitely drop out some smaller particles. Hazard implications, yeah, it's more flooding. What could happen? Yeah, it's not good. But generally, if you install it with some level of safety in mind, I think it's probably going to be safe. So what are we going to do moving forward? We're going to put 2 new debris collectors in this year. I'm looking for suitable locations right now. We're thinking about changing our debris net number 2 with that low flow floatable bypass, which I was talking about. We're working on a less labor-intensive method for net cleaning. I really want to get one of those trucks with the big crane on the back, but they're kind of expensive. And just more data collection. So more data is always better, in my opinion. And yeah, it really helps sell the narrative. So I think that one's it. Yeah, feel free to contact me if you want any information or just want to pick my brain for putting trash collectors in. It's kind of like a passion project for me, and really enjoyed just being able to kind of do our part to clean up the waterways. Thanks. That's all I got.
Thank you, Cody. We appreciate you sharing that information. It's great information. And now we'll move on to our next presenter from the city of Mansfield. We have Howard Redfearn. He is the environmental manager of the city of Mansfield, and he is active on COG's water groups and solid waste as well. We appreciate his input. And Howard, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you, Elena, and I'm going to do my best to try to get us back on track. I have 20 slides with tons of information on them that are really meant for offline consumption. So I'm just going to kind of hit the highlights as we're going through. If you can move on to the next slide. The one thing that I'm not sure everybody knows is exactly where Mansfield is. So I thought I'd put in a little map graphic here so that you don't have to type it into Google. We have approximately 37 square miles that are in 3 counties. Our population right now is right at 76,000. It was at 40,000, or a little bit less when I started in 2005. We are a level 3 phase 2 community, so we do not have to have, nor do we have, a dry weather field screening program. We also do not have an industrial inspection program. We are not required to do the floatable controls. We do utilize the minimum control measure 7 for our in-house construction projects, so we don't have to do an individual NOI for each one of those. We do go on ahead and conduct inspections on our post-construction measures, even though that is not part of our permit requirements. But most of that, so far, the inspections have been on those devices that are located on a city facility. We do have a very small area, 300 acres, that's in the Rush Creek TMDL area. It's caused us some problems with our annual reports and some arguing between me and the TCEQ about what we do and don't need to do and things like that. We were not involved in the TMDL process at all, but with our annual report that did come up. And we are also one of the participants in the Joe Pool Lake Watershed Protection Plan that is currently underway. So the first thing I'm going to talk about today is our household hazardous waste program. So we have had a household hazardous waste program before I got here. So it started in 2002 through our parks department and Keep Mansfield Beautiful. Initially, that first year, they only had a mobile event, and we had 52 households participate. After that, we started, it got started at the time as a voucher program. So residents would have to come to City Hall, get a voucher, and then wait for one of the mobile events or take it to the City of Fort Worth's Environmental Collection Center. In 2007, we started to utilize the drainage utility fee funds to pay for the participation with the City of Fort Worth instead of the parks funds. And as part of that, we eliminated the vouchers. So that's one of the reasons why you see an increase there in 2007. In 2008, I took over as the liaison for Keep Mansfield Beautiful, and we added another mobile collection event. And then in 2010, we started to partner with the City of Arlington, and we trained some of our firefighters and would conduct one of our own collections if we could get that scheduled. The one thing that I would note is when you look at the percentage of participation at the mobile collection events, it's always been pretty significantly high. That was one of the reasons why we made the push to go on ahead and get a permanent collection facility here. Over half of the participants were coming to one of our events. If you've had to put those things together, my lights just went off, then there's a lot of planning and advertising that goes into it. You're trying to advertise, get as many people to participate in an event that has a limited amount of space and participation. So we were routinely and regularly having to turn people away after having waited in a line for over an hour or so, and they got really upset. So we created, we were building our service center, and I was able to utilize that table on the previous slide to kind of justify the construction of a permanent collection facility. So we started in November of 2015. When the other note that I forgot to mention is all of my years are fiscal years because that's how we track everything. So we started November 2015 with just the second Saturday of every month, 10 to 3. In 2018, we added the Thursday and Friday before that second Saturday for 3 to 7 for those folks who, for whatever reason, can't get away during the weekend. And also we wanted to provide them an opportunity during the week, but also after hours. We've only ever had one full-time household hazardous waste coordinator. Our helpers that help him unload as well as bulk are often from other departments. And then the other note is that in 2020, we partnered with the city of Cedar Hill so that their residents are now able to bring their materials to our facility, as well as whenever they hold their own mobile collections, which they haven't done since the pandemic started, then they're able to bring their materials to us. I would also like to point out that through the years, we've utilized the TCEQ solid waste grant program that's operated by COG to help fund different portions of our household hazardous waste program. So this is one of those areas that kind of crosses over between solid waste management and stormwater management. Stormwater folks want to keep all of this stuff out of our gutters and from flowing into our rivers, creeks, and ponds. Solid waste folks want to keep it out of the landfills. So we were able to utilize some of that funding to purchase some of the equipment to fit out the permanent collection center. And previous to that, we were able to utilize some grant funds to purchase a truck and a trailer to help us to haul the materials to different areas. So the big question is, how much does it cost? So in 2018, we started tracking all of our operational costs on an individual line item. That's what you're seeing over there in that table in the lower right-hand corner. The construction cost of the permanent facility was over $800,000. All of this was paid for out of the drainage utility fees program that we have. And those operational costs include all of the consumable items. So drywall and single wall boxes, liners, drums, all of that kind of stuff. The cost paid to disposal companies. We have multiple different places where we send the materials depending on what it is. The grant funds helped us to purchase the non-consumable stuff. So that drum that you're seeing there, the paint crusher on the other slide, a forklift, and a variety of different materials that aren't going to be part of the regular operational cost is what the grant funds were used to help pay for. So one of the things that I would point out is, like Perry, we were noticing some inefficiencies with our street sweeping contracts. So you have the odd thing is, even before I got here and before Mansfield entered into the MS4 program, we were actually sweeping our streets. Our streets department personnel would rent a sweeper, and they would periodically, it was pretty much almost based on nuisance complaints or something like that. Thank you, Krista. That they would come through and go do some street sweeping. There wasn't any real rhyme or reason to it, and there wasn't any real data collection to it. In 2009, we started contracting that out. It's been very inconsistent. Some part of that has been my fault. Some part of that's been our contractor's fault. There were several years where we would have an idea how many miles were swept, but we didn't have any of the data that was collected. In addition to that, I don't think that the way our program has been set up has been the most efficient. Next slide. So beginning this year, we went on ahead and were able to purchase our own street sweeper, and there it is. So street sweepers are not cheap, $240,000. But when you consider the price of the street sweeper, a pickup, a truck, tractor, zero-turn mower, and all of the other ancillary materials, and you spread those costs out over 5 years, and you look at what we were paying our street sweeping contractor and our mowing contractor to take care of some of our drainage areas, it was essentially the same. It was going to be the same cost. So we have now purchased a street sweeper. We've hired a 2-person crew that's going to take over mowing of our drainage areas, also helping with our household hazardous waste consolidation and doing some of our minor drainage maintenance. Unfortunately, I don't have any stats to share on our street sweeping program yet, because we didn't get the sweeper until last month, and we haven't been able to start making use of it yet. But I do expect to be able to address areas a little bit more efficiently, and to get those material weights and volumes per miles improved. And so these are just some of the challenges and other considerations with going with an in-house street sweeping program. One of the things that I from talking to different people throughout my years in the stormwater field is I think I'm in kind of a unique place that I also oversee our drainage maintenance. So one of the things that I have noticed through the years is that we have a huge challenge with managing resident expectations versus what the city's expectations for the level of maintenance is. This picture here is showing a culvert that was actually installed by TxDOT back in like the 60s or something, and it had outfalled. There was a velocity dissipator, this willow tree had grown up and had caused a bunch of silt to build up. When that silt builds up in your system, if you walk back just a little bit further, you'll start to find open water. And in that open water, mosquitoes were breeding. So we actually ended up addressing a drainage maintenance project or issue because of a mosquito problem. And I also oversee our city's mosquito program. So that's how all of that gets tied in together. Historically, our drainage maintenance has been completed by a mix of staff from our streets department as well as contractors, and we haven't had a preventative maintenance or inspection program. So we're hoping to address that with our 2-person crew. This is just some of the statistics over what kinds of materials we have, and then what kinds of work orders we've been able to complete. 2019 was the last one that we have that I had a report ready to go for. So we do contract out some of our drainage maintenance. This is a sketch that I would put together to send out to different utility contractors when I was soliciting bids. We do a little write-up for scope and scale. We try to package 3-4 of these things in together, because generally this particular one was $49,000, but generally they're not all that much money. And so trying to find contractors that are willing to continue to bid, even if they're not going to get the project, and then, to continue to bid on very small projects has been difficult. And so the final thing that I have to talk about is our post-construction water quality requirements. So we adopted those in 2015. They're included in our drainage criteria manual that was adopted by our Planning and Zoning Commission, not by our council. It is based on the ISWIM water quality volumes. And typically residential measures are ponds with a multi-stage outfall. We have had several subdivisions recently that have proposed inlet screens. We really don't like inlet screens in a residential setting, just due to the difficulty keeping track of them, how difficult they are to maintain, and then the fact that really all you're doing with the inlet screens is just collecting the floatables. You're not doing anything to address any potential fertilizer runoff and all of that kind of good stuff. And then on the commercial industrial side, we're seeing mostly separators. So this table shows since when we initially started, we were kind of slow going it, and also sort of coming out of the whole latest recession thing. So we didn't have a ton of development going on. So previously to 2017, we only had 8 devices installed. Since then, and luckily we went on ahead and started our tracking system in 2017, because that's when development started to pick back up. We're now up to 157 total devices and 1,112.11 acres treated. There are estimates, there are ways to estimate how much material's been collected based on efficiencies and all that stuff for the devices, or the manner, or the measures that were selected and installed, we haven't utilized any of that to figure out how much we potentially collected so far. So these are inlet screens that are placed at our maintenance bay areas. So we have all those, the different materials, gravel, topsoil, all that kind of good stuff. As they use the front loader to put the materials into the dump trucks, stuff spills out of the buckets, stuff spills out of the dump trucks. You end up with a big mess on the paved surfaces. So we put the inlet screens in order to collect that, keep it out of our water quality pond. So this is our first water quality only pond. It was not installed, did not need to be installed for any detention purposes. It is a little bit ugly, and that's because of some downstream water surface elevation issues caused water to back up and pond in the bottom of that pond, killing off the grass after it was installed. Next slide. This is another water quality only pond. You can see the restrictor plate there on the that was tapped down to the outfall with a very small opening, so the water will fill the pond and then be released slowly over time. And this one is a detention pond that has a multi-stage outfall. So you'll see the very small 3-inch opening that's down at the bottom. You have the larger openings on the sides that are for the 25-year conveyance storm. And then the top is full open for those flood protection storm flows, so the 100-year storm flows. And that's all that a multi-stage outfall is doing. It's allowing outfall at different rates based on the different types of storm events. This is an example of a separator that was actually installed in a residential area, which we typically don't want or permit. But the cut sheet on the side just shows what's actually in the ground. And then what you're seeing on the left picture there is the finished surface product. Usually these go in a parking lot on a commercial setting. So when you see them, they just look like any other manhole in a paved area. And the one thing that I would note on the post-construction stuff is there is a steep learning curve, both with your in-house staff as well as developer groups and development design staff. That's one of the things that we've been finding. But once everybody kind of works through some of those initial learning struggles, it becomes far easier and far simpler and far more fluid over time. So the one thing I would mention is build in some flexibility if you're looking at starting a post-construction program, especially in the beginning. You do need to make sure that you apply it equitably. Your municipal facility construction is also complied here, and then industrial and commercial do create more runoff, so they are going to need to treat more. So their devices will need to be larger, and then create a tracking system early. We have a spreadsheet that is editable by our environmental staff, so we're able to keep track of things, but it is linked to a GIS shape file, so that when we're out and need to look at something on a map, we're able to do that. And then the one outstanding thing that we don't know about yet is how efficient or effective we're going to be at being able to enforce maintenance over time. And that is my contact information. If you need anything from me, have any questions, feel free to reach out, particularly related to the post-construction stuff. We're always willing to meet with anybody that's looking to go on ahead and get a program started. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Howard, very much for that. And so our next speaker is going to be Amesha Morris. Amesha is the Stormwater Administrator for the City of McKinney. Amesha, the presentation is yours.
So I'm the last presenter, and so I know it's been, everyone's been listening to all information for a while. I just want to give you a heads up. There are a total of 5 slides on this, so we're going to fly through this pretty quickly. For us at the City of McKinney, the last stormwater management permit specified some sort of BMP for floatable removal. And so I'm just going to walk through the process of how we kind of chose the BMPs that we did, or reviewed the BMPs that we did, and which ones we ultimately decided to go with. I thought this would be pretty good so that you can see maybe the pros and cons of some of the BMPs that are out there, as well as what ultimately worked for us in the locations that we were looking for items. So we have a monthly meeting with our drainage team, and our drainage team consists of engineering, stormwater, as well as our streets and drainage team. So when we come to those meetings, we provide any ideas, any of the BMPs that we thought would be useful, and we're just trying to derive which one would be the most economical as well as beneficial for the locations that we were looking for. The first thing that we looked at was called the band-along litter trap. It's kind of a floating boom with a cage on the end, technically. This is really good if you have a stream, a creek, a lake, or for us, we have a aesthetic lake that people take walks on. It's near a lot of residential as well as a high school, and a box inlet flows into it, which kind of we thought would be a good place to actually place this. One of the pros for this, it's floatable litter that we're trying to collect, so we're not really worried about much of anything else, and so the boom arms on this cage net thing floats as well. So that allows us to prevent any wildlife from being caught in there, unless of course they fall on the top. But it allows for fish and wildlife for the most part to get around the device as a whole while still collecting our floatable trash. Some of the hurdles that we came up with is the slopes that lead to that culvert where this would ultimately have been located are kind of steep. And the maintenance on this would require some form of teamwork, either guys coming out, our crews going out and manually scooping it up. You're trying to get as much of that into the net itself, and then actually getting a truck, a crane arm to pick it up and move it to the side. We wouldn't be able to get the equipment that we needed down there. We also we're worried about potentially interactions with the local community. What is a good thing about this device, though, is it does allow you to do some sort of educational promotion on top. So it lets people know what it is, why it's there, and what they can do to help solve the problem. The other thing we liked about it, it rises and falls, obviously, with the water flow. So it wasn't going to be a flood trap or a concern with flooding because of this device. Ultimately, we decided not to go with this because of the older, I think it was just the maintenance was our biggest thing that our takeaway for this. The other one was a netting trash trap, similar to Cody's, but instead of putting it on one outfall, it would be a weir system for concreted stormwater infrastructure. The only problem with that was the weirs usually have to be configured for that specific location, which means we couldn't pick it up, we couldn't move it to another location unless it met pretty much spot on the specifications. Even then, a lot of the ones that we were looking at are pretty permanent. You build it for there, it stays there. The other thing was the netting system. It's going to catch more than just your floatable. It's going to catch litter. It's going to catch potentially wildlife, leaves, things of that nature, which are great for if you're also trying to remove nutrients for the system. But that wasn't our major concern for that. We liked that the bags would be breakaway. So if the water's flowing very heavily to prevent flood, backing up of water and a potential flood problem, the nets can fly off and a string would grab one end and close it. So you didn't also lose your trash. The other problem we came across was, well, how do we get these potentially very large bags of wet sediment, litter, trash? How do we get those up? How many bags do we need to actually keep on hand? Like it was there, the maintenance cost of it as well as the ultimate material cost of it was one of the things that reasons why we decided against it. And then the last one that we were looking at and were seriously considering was our curb inlet filtration inlets. I think I put too many inlets there. And what we liked about this one is we can put them, we can design it for our inlets, which are designed pretty standardly across the MS4, which meant that we can pick these up and move them to any location that we thought was necessary. The other part that we were seeing with these, there is a monthly maintenance and then some. So monthly maintenance of the netting system itself is you pulling them out, either changing out the filter. It's sort of like a very mesh net itself. So you can either shake it out and change it out that way. Sometimes there's rip and tears, and so you have to put a whole entire new filter in. And then on top of that, the system as a whole is biodegradable, which means If there's a lot of, let's say, leaf litter that's sitting in there for a long period of time, the biological process will actually speed up the degradation of the whole entire filtration system. And so looking into it, you'd have to replace the entire system itself about 2 or 3 times a year. And so if we were going to do this, it would have to be in a very small location to get the most bang for our buck. Now, potentially only putting these in 10 to 20 locations. So we had to figure out what our location was ultimately going to be. The city of McKinney is actually pretty wide and not fully built out. Of this entire area, only 50% of this is built out, so we have another 50% to go. Our most concentrated area is that little blue box. It's our downtown area that also consists of our historical downtown, City Hall. We have Highway 5 that flows through it. We have 2 neighborhoods as well as the airport. And then our mill district is slowly but surely turning into sort of our arts district. So we have a lot more breweries and multi-use and share spaces that are slowly being built in that area. So we wanted to concentrate there first. Yay. So we actually got really, really lucky on this one. We had to update our stormwater infrastructure under Highway 5, which required us to do some borings, multiple borings, but we wanted to protect the inlets that were already there. So our third-party contractor actually put in some really usable, movable filter curb inlet baskets. And what's nice about these, it's low maintenance. You drill some holes, you put the metal gate, and you can put the basket on it. The whole purpose for this basket was to collect any litter and trash that's coming specifically off the street, which is where most floatable litter comes from, and to keep it out of the storm system while they were actually building and upgrading that system itself. What we liked about it was minimal hardware. It's easy for our third-party contractor to put it in. It's also easy for our own crews if, let's say, over a long period of time, maybe we had an event and there was a lot of trash that was in it and they wanted to get that out quicker, they can just pop the lid and do it themselves while we still actually had our monthly maintenance being done by a third-party contractor. I don't have the whole entire cost breakdown for you guys, but if you also like it, I can reach out to our drainage team. They are the ones that run the contract on that one. What's nice about this is we can move these, which is probably the most important thing as the area of downtown starts to shift and shape and mold itself. The other thing is downtown McKinney has a lot of events. So we have our holiday events, our Oktoberfest, some nonprofit events, and that means an increase in foot traffic. So it behooves us, it's in our best us ultimately that we can move these knowing when these events are going to happen, because that'll reduce some of the litter that we're going to see that's coming off of the streets as more people are there and participating. And so that was the system that we ultimately decided to go with. That's our physical system. And so the next moment we have is, it's not a physical system, but it's a way that we're communicating that actually is helping us get ahead of the problem. And that's our inspector committees. Inspector committees include our police, code, erosion, stormwater, field, and public works department. They meet at least quarterly, but they have the ability to, if they have an immediate problem or they're seeing something that's being pretty consistent, they have the ability just to call a meeting on spot, either with all the departments or the ones that they really need to meet that most influences. The biggest thing for us that we're seeing is homeless encampments. So that requires a lot of help across the board. Homeless encampments are generally finding out of sight areas that are still close to major roadways, usually on private property. They'll encamp there for months to a year and then they'll leave, but they'll have left a lot of trash. And this, the picture on the right-hand side, that was about 5 tons. I believe that when our drainage crew came and cleaned it up, it was about 5 tons of trash. And that's not just floatable. It is like strollers and trash cans and things like that, but a good amount of it is floatable trash that we were concerned about. So with this inspector community, what's been very helpful, especially with helping with the homeless encampments, is our code enforcement knows how to enforce the private side. Now, the private owners are technically responsible for their property, no matter if somebody else is the person that dumped or left the litter. They're still ultimately responsible for that site. And so we work with code to utilize stormwater ordinances to enforce that. We work with our police officers because sometimes the encampments still have individuals on there. We have 2 police officers, one that specializes in homeless communities and one that specializes with people that are suffering with drug addiction. So it's been very helpful with us communicating with them to also find where maybe other encampments are to mitigate some of the trash and to actually help other individuals as a whole. What's been helpful with our field crews is our field crews have been able to tell us where we're seeing just naturally trash is just piling up in specific areas. Specifically for us, we have a lot of illicit discharge or illicit dumping, should I say, that's occurring over by our airport area. And so the issue with that is just trying to figure out how we can best hedge off some of that trash that's going over there, and maybe we can develop a device that will help us mitigate that in the future. So those are the 2 ones that we have over at the city of McKinney. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Amesha. We appreciate your sharing that information, and I'd like to just emphasize to you that the COG has resources on water education and outreach, as well as BMPs. We have a BMP library, and that information is in the slides. There's a BMP guidebook under development as well. And you can email us at any time and we'll get you in contact with the right person. That information is in the slides. And thank you everyone for joining us today. And this webinar is now over.